Good afternoon. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. I have just gotten back from an amazing 3 days right here in Washington, D.C. with the survivors of institutional abuse convention. Excuse me. There's international abuse as well. Actually, in some ways, the institutional abuse is much more frightening because I think we're used as Americans to hearing horrific stories from abroad. There's massacres in Syria. I've gone on air. I've talked about them. There's horrors going on in North Korea. And as horrific and awful as those things are, and as much as I strive to help the people of Syria or to try to get rid of the terrible dictator in North Korea, there's something, I don't know, there's a special pit in my stomach and a special, hardness, I guess, that hits my heart pretty bad when I hear this stuff going on in the United States of America. Because I guess I expect other countries to have brutal dictators that mistreat or torture or abuse children. I don't expect it to happen in the United States. And what I've been learning through my work with the Survivors of Institutional Abuse and HEAL and CAFD and other organizations that care about the ethical treatment of children is, and it may astonish you, is that we actually mistreat children worse than we do adults. Now, that may surprise a lot of you because you think, well, a child obviously is in a much more helpless situation. You would think, well, if we're going to be harsh on anyone, right, you're going to be harsh on an adult. If you've got your husband wants some food or your child, you'll probably feed your child first. Your husband can go out and get some more food if he needs some, right? If it's a very strong punishment in the legal system in prison, you kill someone and you're an adult, you're put away for life, you get the death penalty. You kill someone and you're 12 years old, a lot of times you're put in juvenile detention, and then you could get out and rejoin your life. We are harder, we think, in our minds on adults than we are on children. That just makes sense. Children are just growing up. They are learning. They are not as strong as adults. They need our help. So what surprised you to know, because it surprised me, that tens of thousands of kids all across America are being treated worse than we ever treat a prisoner, an adult prisoner behind bars, and these are kids who've committed no crimes. If you don't believe me, stick around, because we're going to have a whole bunch of survivors of institutional abuse on this show, and they're going to tell you stories that they're just going to break your heart. They've broken mine. Because, I don't support abuse of adults. I don't support torture of adults. But children? Torturing children? Is there anything more cruel and wrong than torturing and abusing children? Enough of me. Let me get to some of the people that have suffered this and are so brave and so courageous. The person that I have next to me, Janine, I met her last year at the first Survivors Convention, and this is a woman who will tell you. I mean, you said you have stage fright, right? So, I do. So the fact that you're coming here on radio, that's extraordinary, and I'm really honored to have you here today. Janine, tell me a little bit about your story. Where were you placed?
I was placed in the Victory Christian Academy. And it was a reform school.
The Victory Christian Academy. Now, where is that located?
It was located in Ramona, California. And
how did you get there? Why did your parents send you there?
I consider it a kidnapping. I had a 3.5 grade point average in school.
That's very good. That's like an A- average. That's very good.
I thought so, too.
Absolutely.
I actually wanted to be in a Christian private school, and my parents placed me in there. And
speak really close into the mic.
Oh, okay. Thank
you. Go ahead.
I had a 3.5 grade point average in school, and I was a strong Christian. I even had I Love God on my folder.
Okay.
No drinking, no alcohol.
Sounds like you're a good kid.
Almost like a goody two shoes. I say almost.
All right. Well, look, that's great. So you're a model student. All right. And so you wanted to go this place originally? You didn't know what it was all about, I'm sure.
The private school that I was at, that is the place I wanted to be. But I confronted my parents about sexual abuse that was happening.
Oh, my God.
In the family, and they didn't believe me. And, of course...
So you, I don't mean to pry, but you were sexually abused.
I was sexually abused by a family member.
By a family member. And you said, hey, this family member has molested me.
Right.
And they didn't believe you.
They didn't believe me. I was on the stand. I was in a trial, our personal family trial, basically.
Right. How old were you at the time?
I was 16 years old. And so the time of the abuse happened when I was 15.
And you confront your parents and you say, hey, this guy in the family raped me, you would think you come to mom and dad, you'd get a lot of sympathy.
Right.
And you didn't get that.
I didn't get that. I didn't get the proper treatment that I needed for that, counseling. Basically, what they did was they had told me they tricked me into it and said they were going to take me to a psychiatrist. And I believed them, and they took me to Ramona, California. It was a 12-foot fence with barbed wire, and
Wow.
It was too late. I was already inside the gate.
This is astonishing because you've been raped, you've been victimized. That in itself, all by itself, is a horrific crime for which we put people away for the rest of their lives. You then come home to your parents to tell them, of course that's who you'd come home to your parents, to say, hey, this guy raped me. And they victimize you further by not believing you and not trusting you. And then you're sent away to a prison camp, and you're a complete victim here. It's amazing that this is legal in America. So tell us about the camp. What was Victory Christian Academy like?
So excluding the torment that I experienced at Victory, let's just take it to the stop at the gate. I would say that was far worse than the actual sexual abuse I experienced. I feel that I was so betrayed by my parents, and then just take me to the gate, and then leave me there at Victory. That was the biggest betrayal
So they just like pushed you out of the car and said bye. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. How did it happen?
So basically, to the point where they had taken me. Of course, when they put me on the trial stand at home, prove it. I was getting angry naturally and crying and upset.
Sure.
So they just thought I was an out of control teenager.
Even though you were a kid with a 3.5 average who's a goody two-shoes at school.
Right.
Did they ever consider that maybe this family member had in fact raped you?
They kept going back and forth. It would either be, I don't believe you, you're lying, you're just doing this for attention, or my daughter's wild.
Did you have a good relationship with your parents prior to this incident?
No. That's why I ended up living with other family members.
If you don't mind, even before you confronted them with the incident, you've been placed. So your parents basically, let's face it, weren't very good parents.
Right.
And that's part of what we're dealing with here. Not every parent is a good parent. Not every parent should have a child. All right, so you're placed in this institution, Victory Christian Academy. How long were you there?
I was supposed to be there for a year, and lucky for me, I got out after 8 months, but the first month of being there, the damage was already done.
Describe what happens. You got to understand, very few people have been in these places, and we really don't know what goes on there. So please explain what a frightened, sexually molested 16-year-old girl is dropped off by her parents, who's been betrayed by them. What do you see when you get there? I mean, your mind must be whirling already before you even walk in the door.
A preacher by the name of Michael Palmer took me into his office with my parents and said, you have given your parents enough trouble. You were here for a year. And they knew they knew it because they knew where they sent me, that this was a reform school, because obviously it was for troubled kids, because he specifically said, you gave them trouble. And I said, how could you do this to me? How could you do this to me? And the other staff had taken me back to the showers.
And they physically grabbed you. I mean, I assume you didn't want to go.
I didn't want to go, but I really didn't put a fuss in because I knew what the repercussions would be.
You could figure that out
I could figure that out. So I just went along with the program because I knew that if I were to try to run, I would be tackled or worse.
What did you see happen while you were there in the 8 months? What happened to other girls? What kinds of abuses did you see go on?
I actually have the most horrific thing that I actually witnessed, that I actually put in a letter to Congress, is a 13-year-old girl being tormented in the name of God. By the way, please let me reiterate that this is a Christian reform school. You couldn't just do whatever you wanted. This was a boot camp / concentration camp / cult. Girls were around in a circle, and inside the circle was a 13-year-old girl with duct tape over her mouth, crying. Her hands were behind her back, handcuffed. She was bound to a chair. I thought one of the other girls had put her in there. To my amazement, it was all orchestrated by a staff member. I was horrified. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't save this girl. I couldn't go to my bunk and say, excuse me, I want to go read my Bible. I don't want to participate in this. You had to participate in this. You had to watch.
So it wasn't just that this girl was clearly tortured and abused. You had to watch it.
I had to watch it and not say anything, because if I said something, if I tried to help her, if I took the duct tape off of her, I would be the one in a solitary confinement, or maybe even just like her in a circle.
So what are some of the things they did? They put the girls who would not comply, they put them in solitary confinement. Anything with food or shelter, or and in some of these cases, we're going to talk to some other survivors, they were locked in closets or forced on marches, anything like that?
Yes. Let me back up.
Sure.
Let's go back to the 13-year-old girl in the circle, and I'll close with this. She was in a circle crying. She could have suffocated.
That's true.
All the girls in the circle were going around saying something derogatory about her.
Oh, my God.
Lowering her self-esteem in the name of God. This is in the name of God. How can you slap on your title, Christian Academy? How can you do that? I just cannot believe that this is happening in America. And it's not just this school, it's many. All right, let's move on to solitary confinement. I was actually locked up in solitary confinement the first time I got there, and I was locked in there for 8 hours. A preaching tape was going on, and that's when I figured out that we're abusing the girls in there. I knew that we're abusing because I heard the sermons, and that to me was not Christian. I've never heard that in a church before in my life. It was an independent fundamental Baptist, and I didn't realize where the hell I was or what this denomination was until I actually got out.
And what was in those tapes? What kinds of things?
Basically, this preacher was calling the girls whores, blaming them for being raped. It was their fault.
Were you blamed for being raped?
Yes, by them.
You told them what happened? And
I tried thinking that they were rational people. No. They actually sat down and had me pray to God, asking God to forgive me.
As if you'd done something
As
wrong.
if I've done something wrong. Any rape counselor would have, I don't know, went off on them.
What does this do to your brain? I mean, you're trained that being Christian is good. You're a good religious girl. You have I love God. You believe in this, and you certainly believe rape is bad. You learn normal things, and suddenly you're in this topsy-turvy world where your parents are your enemies, where the rapist is to be forgiven, where Christian people are treating you badly and asking you to seek forgiveness. I mean, how does that affect your brain when what you've known all your life is right and wrong is suddenly reversed?
Right.
How does that, did you have a breakdown? I mean, how do you deal with that?
I couldn't even have a breakdown at this place. They wouldn't even let you react. You were like a soldier in the middle of a war. You couldn't even react. You had no time to react. If you reacted, they would punish you further.
And give me again some of the punishments. So there's solitary. What were some of the things they would do?
Verbally abuse you in chapel, call you out. So in the middle of chapel, a preacher would call you out or call you a heathen. Again, the solitary confinement, standing a girl for hours, days at a time in front of a pole.
Wait, now standing, so the girl had to stand up in front of a pole?
In front of a pole and just...
Hours on end.
Hours on end.
It's not easy to stand up for hours on end. And what happens if she wanted to sit down?
Solitary confinement or other punishments.
You know, it's interesting. John McCain has talked about the fact of how horrible solitary confinement is. We actually, as prisoners, there are restrictions on how much you can place a hardened murderer in solitary because it's seen as a particularly harmful and damaging treatment, and yet they were doing it to teenage girls.
Yes. I also want to talk about the buddy system too. It was the biggest form of degradation to me. When I first got there, I had to be on buddy for a month. And what buddy is that you follow a girl for 1 month, 3 feet behind. You were 3 feet behind. So it was almost like an invisible dog leash. In fact, they went a step further that if you got out of the 3 feet and fell behind, they would actually put a dog leash on your wrist to the buddy.
So it's all about control and degradation.
Yes.
Now, what's interesting is I assume your buddy was a fellow, I guess the word is inmate or
right, another student. In fact, my buddy was 12 years old and I was 16. So this is another student.
And wow, is she ordering you around now, this 12-year-old?
Pretty much, telling me the rules, what to be expected, what I can say, what I cannot say. Freedom of speech was taken from me. I couldn't talk to any of the girls. I couldn't look them in the eye.
What happens if you looked them in the eye?
I would get punished.
You would get punished.
With
Things like solitary.
A demerit, solitary confinement. Demerits were, I will not look at another girl. I will not look at another girl. 100 times, sometimes 500 times.
So after 8 months, when you get out of a place like this, how does that affect you for the rest of your life? You're a beautiful woman. You have a wonderful husband. I've met him. You seem to have a pretty good life. How does what happened to you many years ago as a teenager, how does that affect you today?
I'm not going to lie to you. It's a fight. It's been 24 years. And I do, on the outside, people would think I have it together. And in we have so many facets to us. In a lot of ways, I am together. But then there's a part of me that does have the low self-esteem, that does have insomnia, that does suffer from depression. A lot of people don't even see that, Do
you still have nightmares about this place?
I do. I've had nightmares about this place where I'm back in behind the gate and I'm trying to get away and I can't get away.
And how do you deal with your parents today?
I don't speak with, I don't have a relationship with them.
I don't blame you.
I've tried 3 years after. I didn't speak to them for 3 years. I left home at 17. For 3 years, I didn't speak to them. And then, I went back. Something happened in my life where someone close to me passed away, and I wanted to make everything right. And then I went back to them, and I tried the relationship thing. But they still continue, I want to say the Jerry Springer behavior. And you can either choose to be in a Springer show or you can choose.
Luckily, as an adult, you have that choice to walk away.
Exactly.
The choice you didn't have as a teenager. By the way, how'd you get out of this place?
This is what I believe happened. And then my parents told me something different. My parents said when they picked me up, well, this is Easter and it's a time for forgiveness. And we forgive you. And that's why we're taking you out. The prodigal daughter returns.
Yeah.
If you know anything about the prodigal son, that's not a very good analogy. First of all, you kidnapped me. You didn't give me any money.
Right. And I was one
wrong analogy.
So what do you really think happened?
What I think happened is, I was at a private Christian school, and some of the girls that were there got placed into the private Christian school, and they must have said what was going on with this place, and I think that
the authorities came and shut this place down.
Basically, they were spreading the rumor, which was true rumors about this place, and it probably got back to my mother, and they probably thought, "What are you doing with why is your daughter in the reform school?" Because no one knew where I was. I mean, It was a kidnapping.
So they were embarrassed by what they did.
Right. Why is this 3.5 grade point average in a reform school? So she probably got a bad reputation, and then got me out early.
Janine, you walked with us at the rally, and it's amazing to me for someone who says they have stage fright and is afraid. You told me at the rally yesterday that you weren't intending to speak, and then some brave people got up and told their stories, and then you came to tell your story. I remember you didn't want to stand on the podium. I kind of made you do that. So I said, "Nope, the camera can't see you
I'll take the stairs,
if you're not on the podium." How does it feel for someone who, by your own description, is somewhat shy and has somewhat stage fright to now go public with your story? How does that feel to you? Is it scary? Is it empowering? Is it both?
It's empowering, and I will do whatever it takes to get the word out. And even if I have to climb over this obstacle of being stage fright, I will do that. I will do whatever it takes to make it known that this is what's going on in America today. This is what's happening. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to let this happen? Allow this to happen? I'm sorry, but I don't know any reform schools or teenage programs so far that have been great and fantastic.
I don't either.
And anyone who says they are, and you've got a bunch of girls, 50 of them in the same place, but one of them is saying different, you need to realize that there is something called brainwashing, and it is like a cult. And after a while, you start believing these people. And
did you communicate with your parents during those 8 months?
I had no other recourse. If it was my choice, I wouldn't have.
Right. But did you write letters to them?
I had to, twice a week. And I couldn't write anybody else, by the way.
Only
Nobody.
Your parents.
I had more rights in jail. I should have been in jail.
When you wrote your parents, could you tell them the truth?
No.
What would happen
if I did, we're talking about my parents here.
Right, that's true.
Let's just say I had normal parents.
Right.
Normal parents that believed me. I couldn't say, please help me.
They
please get me
restrained
out
me.
of here.
They duct taped a girl. They handcuffed her. No.
If I had normal parents, if I did that, they read every single thing that was going on.
They monitor
I couldn't make a phone call. I couldn't dial 911. I couldn't call my boyfriend. Please get me out of here. Please get your parents to get me out of here. Nothing. I was trapped.
And this is what I'm trying to bring the focus on. It's amazing to me, as most of us, again, would, if it, we would treat a child better than an adult, and yet in America you have legal rights as an adult and not as a child. And if you happen to have horrible parents, as I'm sorry you did, Janine, that's not Janine's fault. You can't help where you're born. You can be completely abused. It always strikes me that if a parent abuses a child, if a parent were to duct tape a child and handcuff her to a chair or make her stand all day, you call Child Protective Services, they would come in, they throw that parent in jail. But the parent can pay someone to do that, and suddenly it's okay? It doesn't make any sense.
It
Janine,
doesn't.
Thank you so much for your bravery, for sharing this story, for being courageous enough to come on the radio.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I love you for doing this for us. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that so much. I got my earphones on. So in fact, I should probably take them off. Folks, if you want to call in and join this discussion, I encourage you to do so. We're going to have a testimony from survivors for the whole next 2 hours. Many have similar stories from Janine. Some things are a little bit different, but the same theme is the same. Helpless kids who've done nothing wrong being tortured and abused. Why does this go on in America, and what we can do to stop it? There's actually a bill in Congress to stop it. I'm going to talk about that in just a few minutes, too. If you want to call in, 202-889-9797. 202-889-9797. This is Mark Levine and the Inside Scoop. We'll be right back right after this.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was so
pleasure. I told you your story is great.
What I'm thinking about doing for Congress, just real quick, is probably having that meeting.
You're listening to WPWC.
Show this video.
We Act
Have
Radio,
a bunch of
1480 AM. WeActRadio.com.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine talking about survivors of institutional abuse. You may not even know this is a problem in America. If you heard Janine's story, you cannot help but be moved by it. And I wish I could say that it was an anomaly, that what happened to Janine is just one example of awful parents sending one girl to one awful place. I wish I could say that. It's not true. The next two ladies you're going to hear from were in a place called Straight that existed way back in the, 80s, I guess it was?
Early 80s.
Early 1980s. This is not
80s.
something new. This has been going on for a long time. I want to ask you both your stories. So I got Dina here and Leslie here. I start with Leslie. Is that the rule here? All right. Okay. So let me take my headphones off since we're not playing the music. And I'm going to start with you, Leslie. So now you were not in Straight, but your brother was.
Correct.
And why was your brother sent to Straight?
It certainly wasn't because he had a drug problem.
Straight is ostensibly, by the way, a drug treatment
specific
center, right? Unlike the Janine was in a Christian academy. This was supposedly something to help get kids off drugs.
Right. It was specific to drugs.
Talking to the mic a little bit more.
It was specific to drugs and people that abuse drugs. Although I would say 98% of the people in there, children in there, did not have a drug problem,
including your brother.
Right.
So why was your brother put there?
Well, back in the early 80s with the Nancy Reagan Just Say No whole thing, if your child was surly or your teenager was doing poorly in school or was belligerent to you or didn't follow the rules.
I don't know a teenage kid that doesn't talk back to their parents.
Exactly. But back then the big buzzword was druggy behavior. Your child, if you could not, quote unquote, control your child, they were a druggie.
So your brother talked back a bit to his parents and was put in straight. For how long was he there?
Total.
The mic a little bit more.
A total of not quite 3 years, over 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Over 2.5.
What are some of the things that would happen to him at straight?
He was starved. He was
starved, denied food.
Absolutely.
Just they didn't feed him.
They didn't feed him, or if they did feed him, they had what they referred to as peanut butter diets. It was a punishment. And you would get peanut butter diets and a Dixie cup of water 3 times a day.
You would have to eat only peanut butter
3 times a day.
And a single Dixie cup of water. You know, peanut butter makes you thirsty.
Thick peanut butter.
And this is just to torture him, I guess.
It's punishment.
It's punishment.
Not torture. It's
punishment. Excuse me. Punishment.
Right.
For not complying with the
Whatever.
program. And what are some of the things they would do in the program that he might not have complied with?
He didn't sit up straight. He wrote his moral inventories incorrectly, which is something that they had to do every night. We all had to do. Siblings had to do it.
Now, this is interesting to me. You're a sibling. You're not in the program. Why do you have to do anything?
Well, actually, as far as Straight Incorporated, the entire family was the entire family cell. Parents, step-parents, children, siblings, everybody was involved in some way or another. That's how they kept the whole cult-like process moving along, because they involved everyone. So everyone was a part of the brainwashing and their movement to make the United States drug-free.
I see. So you actually had to do things yourself. And I'm going to get to Dina's story in just a second. But your brother was there after 2.5 years. He finally got out. How did he get out?
This was not long after a very brave young man named Fred Collins sued Straight for kidnapping. He was 18. He said, "I have rights." He escaped, and he sued them. And there were questions, not all of the parents were completely brainwashed. And one morning my brother spoke to my parents, told them some of the smaller abuses, because I think he knew if he told them about arms being broken and heads being smashed on the floor and stuff, that they wouldn't believe him, because it was the extreme. And my parents immediately pulled him from the program.
After 2.5 years.
Mm.
And then your brother got out of the program, but apparently the demons of the program continued to haunt him.
The damage was done at that point.
He had, I guess, post-traumatic stress syndrome would be a way of characterizing it.
He did, but, hindsight, because back in the early 80s, it hasn't been till recently that bipolar and depression and all these newer buzzwords, and I don't mean that in a bad way.
Right. People understand more about these
absolutely.
these afflictions.
And back then there was nothing like that, and if your child was a problem child, they were a druggie. So I think along with absolutely complex PTSD, and I think my brother was bipolar, and I absolutely know that he suffered from depression, hindsight. All of that took its toll on him, and not quite a year after my parents pulled him from the program, he killed himself.
One of the things that we did at the convention was read a name of documented cases of more than 300 kids who have been killed by these programs, some within this program, some from suicide after. Your brother's story, while it needs to be told, is unfortunately not an isolated one.
No, I have to say, because I read the names of people from Straight that have passed away, and I was shocked. I had 3 typed pages of names, and out of all 3 pages of names, there was one person that died from cancer. There was another person that died from an overdose. The rest were all suicide.
On my page, they all died from some of the restraints they used, forcible restraints where, well, actually, I'm going to ask Dina, I'm going to ask you about some of that because you were in straight yourself, right?
Yes.
And how long were you in straight?
About between 2 and 3 months.
So that's not that very long, considering, I mean, Leslie's brother there for 3 years.
Absolutely not.
And why were you sent to straight?
My mom tricked me into going there. I'm really quite not sure of the backstory because we still don't speak.
No, that's very interesting. This has been many, many years, obviously since the early 80s, and you don't speak to your mom.
No.
All because she incarcerated you for 2 months against your will.
Yes.
In the hellhole called straight.
Yes, and it was very hypocritical of her because I was not doing drugs and she was.
And she was?
She was.
Wow. So what did you see at straight? Tell me about some of those restraints.
It happened constantly. We were in a room at least at any given time with, I'd say, 400 kids is what it seemed like.
How old were you at the time?
15. I went in at 15, came out at 16. I turned 16 in there. And constantly, I guess from the constant stress, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at any given to get a scream out or anything. And this would, until that person calmed down, which when you're filled with that much rage and frustration could be hours. And you still couldn't even, like, you hear it going on, but everyone's still made to face forward as if this isn't going on next to you. But it was constantly.
One of the things that, the extraordinary, weird stuff that goes on in places like this, one of the extraordinary things is in order to get their attention in a regular school setting, you raise your hand. I'd like to speak. It's hard to demonstrate in these confined quarters of a radio station. I'm going to stand back. But can you show us what you had to do? Not as dramatically, perhaps. Would that be terrible to show what they made you do?
As far as motivating?
As far as
I
motivating.
couldn't do that. It literally, like...
It would drive you crazy.
No, it would make me want to throw up.
All right, okay.
But I would
I'll
like to
describe it.
mention
I'll
something
describe it
about
then.
the hand, if I could. Like, it had to be, you know, and my timeline within there is completely screwed up, and I remember very little, but one specific thing I remember is... being a female, getting my normal cycle in there, I remember raising my hand because you had to, like, put your hand up like a flag to use the bathroom because we only got 2 bathroom breaks a day. And it being slammed down constantly. Like, within, you know, every time I put it up, it would get slammed down. I keep putting it up because I had to go to the restroom and I was made to sit in that chair all day. In my mess.
Yeah. I don't want to cause you any emotional distress, so I'll do this on camera maybe after you leave the radio station. I'll show them what, quote, motivating was. It's basically flailing your arms pretty wildly and wildly in ways that are
and
are really...
if you don't do it, they're, like, forcing you to do it. Like, people physically take your arms to force you.
And there was a lot of physical...
Constant physical force.
Physical force. And no escape.
No.
You're very brave to tell this story, and I really do appreciate it. I really appreciate you coming on and telling the story. Thank you. Let me go back to Leslie here. You, as a sibling, were made to attend, I guess what you call meetings, family meetings? What do you call them?
Well, the siblings had to go to 2 separate kind of meetings. We had our own sibling meetings or raps, talks.
But you're not even in the program.
Correct.
How did they make you go? Your parents made you go?
Oh, there was no choice.
There was no choice. No, explain that to me, because people, you have to understand, Leslie, people who don't know of these programs don't understand how there couldn't be a choice. So you got to explain how there wasn't a choice.
If I skipped a meeting, a siblings meeting,
what
or
happens?
I skipped, and I went to the next one, I was stood up as if I was in the program. We called it, the siblings called it the big room. We were the siblings, and then there was the parents. Then there was the big group, which is what my brother was in. It's what Dina was in. And if you missed meetings, sibling meetings, you could end up in the program.
Wow.
Because that's your responsibility, and that's druggy behavior.
Druggy behavior to miss a single meeting. Now, your parents obviously acquiesced, at least, if not actively supported, this kind of program. One of the things that you were telling me is that when you were, your last time you marched in Washington, before yesterday.
The only time I've ever
The only time you ever marched in Washington, before yesterday, when you marched with the group to stop institutional abuse, you actually marched with a sign at age 13 to support straight.
It was 30 years ago, almost 31, but it was 30 years ago, and that same brave young man I was talking about, Fred Collins, when he was suing straight, they were, and it was at the federal level, they were at the federal courthouse in Alexandria, and we straight, we were out front protesting the lawsuit. And I was 13, little towhead, and I had a big old sign that said straight was great. And we were all walking around with our straight is great
Did
signs.
you think straight was great when you were 13?
I thought whatever I was told to think. I was 13.
So your parents told you, hey, carry this sign and march.
My parents, my friends, my brother.
It's a whole cult. There's a whole group of people involved in this.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things that I want to point out is I actually began studying this issue back in 2005 with straight, was actually the particular residential prison camp slash I hate to call it a treatment center because the only treating they did was violent
Facility.
torture facility, a torture camp. I began because the founder of Straight, a guy by the name of Mel Sembler, was actually our ambassador to Italy and to Australia under George W. Bush. He gave a lot of money to George W. Bush. He got a lot of accolades from President Bush. And he actually has been running Mitt Romney's campaign as well, giving a lot of money to Mitt Romney. These are powerful people, and they have powerful friends. And I think that's why they get away with torturing children. And I just want to let people know that one of the things that I am very concerned about, and I know everyone in this community is legislation to stop child abuse and to stop, because people say, well, how could this happen? The answer is very powerful people got paid a lot of money. Your parents, they paid money for this place?
Yes.
I don't know if you want to talk about how much, but it was a lot of money.
Probably my brother's college tuition, my college tuition, and if they had 2 other children, their college tuition.
All to have you be tortured, restrained.
All to lose my brother.
And of course your brother lost his life.
And the family broke apart. My parents got divorced, and and then there was me in the background. So yeah, all for that. Yay.
It's evil. Leslie can laugh about it because she's a grown-up and because it was 30 years ago and because sometimes you laugh rather than crying. But there's a bill by Congressman George Miller. It's called the Stop Abuse in Residential Treatment Centers Act. It passed the House in 2009 when the Democrats were in charge. The Republicans filibustered it in the Senate because they were against needless regulation. I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, torturing children is not something that is needless to stop. It is essential to stop in the United States of America. And one of the reasons why I'm doing this program is to encourage you to call your member of Congress wherever you live. You can pick up the phone and dial 202-225-3121. That's the Capitol switchboard. Do it on Monday. And tell your member of Congress, tell your senator, tell your representative, hey, did you know that children are being tortured and abused in America legally? That they're doing it in facilities, that parents who couldn't legally abuse their children can outsource it, that powerful political figures are allowing this to happen, and ask simply that it be regulated. I'd like to ban these facilities, but we can start at least with regulation. This is Mark Levine. We're going to bring on some more survivors in just a few minutes. If you want to dial in, it's 202-889-9797, 202-889-9797. I want to thank both Dina and Leslie for being courageous enough to tell your stories. I really do appreciate it. And I know I'll see you both again at the next convention.
Yep. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for coming in. We'll be right back with more of the Inside Scoop right after this.
You okay?
You're listening to WPWC We Act Radio, 1480 AM.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine talking to survivors of institutional abuse. Rhonda, you and I met, I guess, at the SIA convention last year.
Yep.
And it's funny, I've gotten to know so many of you, and you're all such wonderful, strong people, particularly after undergoing what you've been through. It's amazing to me, because your stories are so strong and so real and so powerful. We're going to get to yours in just a second. But you have an ordinary life. You haven't, I mean, I won't have to go into all the details, but ordinary job and family and all. And yet you've got this thing in the back of your head that happened to you years ago. Is that a little weird, disconcerting to go back and forth between your real life and what happened all those years ago?
Kind of, but now a lot of people around me are aware of what happened to me, and so it helps for me to talk about it. It's so my life now. All of this is my life, that it's now my friends. It's bringing awareness. So actually integrating it all in together is made me more of a whole as a person.
Talking about it actually makes it easier.
Yeah, instead of trying to live one life that nobody knows about and all of these things that go on in my head that no one knows, and then try to be a mom and a wife and a friend. And
so let's talk about it. Where were you placed?
New Bethany Home for Girls, Arcadia, Louisiana.
And how long were you there?
I was there 1 year.
Just 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
But 1 year can be traumatizing. We just heard from Dina. She was in straight for only I should say 2-3 months. And yet that 3 months clearly has traumatized her to this day. You were there a year. Tell us, what's life like? What's an ordinary day like in New Bethany Home for Girls?
Well, you wake up in the morning and you do roll call. And we all file into a line, and they go down the list to make sure that every girl is still there. And then we would go to what was called morning devotions, where we would still be in our pajamas and sit down and have a little church session in the morning. Then you would get ready and go to breakfast. When you crossed you were 2 by 2 everywhere you went, and we would cross the street and line into the gym. And then whoever was the staff person crossing us would call out a scripture, and then we would all be made to recite the scripture. It was almost like a chant. That's one of the deepest core memories, is the chanting of the scripture that has stayed with me so long. Then you'd go in and eat. You'd go to school. You'd go work in the fields.
Working in the fields, what does that mean?
We would, they would take a certain amount of us out, and we would pick potatoes, we would pick shuck corn, anything, he would plow the fields, but we had to plant them. We had to.
Who's he?
Mac Ford. He's the owner of New Bethany Home for Girls.
So you were basically picking tomatoes in his private garden?
Yes.
That he, I guess, sold on the market?
Yes, and then we were required to wear dresses, and so we were in the fields in dresses, and the ants would crawl clear, and they would blister your body.
Why couldn't you wear jeans?
A woman is not to wear anything that pertains to a man.
I see.
And so we had, our shirts could only be 3 fingers from our collarbone. Anything that we might do, like if your skirt went up above your knee for a second, you were doing something sexual towards one of the male workers there. Yes, and the big thing was that they really used Eve to what happened with Adam and Eve and the apple.
The temptress.
Yes, the temptress. And so we became, in the eyes of at least Mac Ford and his staff, we were the epitome of Eve. And it was
How old are you here?
I'm 15.
You're 15.
But there's much younger girls than me.
And you're tempting some guy.
Mm-hmm. Because your skirt has slipped up.
Because you have ants on your legs and your skirt's lifted up a little bit. So how would you be punished if your skirt got above your knee, or you were otherwise tempting a man in a way Mac Ford didn't like? How did they punish you?
There were all different forms of punishment. You would get either beat with the paddle. I got 86 swats with the paddle.
86 in one.
2 weeks before I left because I thought it would be funny. I took the song Hotel California and I rewrote it. I like to write twisted tunes. Mm-hmm. And I rewrote it, Welcome to New Bethany, Home for Girls. And it's very ironic that at the end of that song,
check out anytime you like, but
you can never leave. And that's my whole life. That has been so real to me. I don't know why I picked that song. I don't know. But they found it when they would do room search. And they found the letter. And so in morning devotions, Miss Nora.
It's a letter you
wrote?
It
was like a
So you just wrote something down?
I just wrote it, yeah.
Just like for yourself. It wasn't like you were playing on the PA system, Hotel California.
Right.
You just wrote down a little note about New Bethany. You check anytime you can like, but you can never leave, which happened to be true. Mm-hmm. And just for writing this little note to yourself, they found it, and then what did they do?
They read it in front of everybody first, and some girls were in there, Miss Nora, that's not a poem. Which I always wondered how they knew all the lyrics to these songs.
They lived in the outside world, like you.
Well, so then I ended up getting 86 swats, and you have to lift up your skirt, and so your slip is showing, and bend over and grab the chair and hold on to the chair. And Miss Nora was a very large woman. And she would take the paddle and lean it so it would touch her shoulder over here before she would swing it down.
So she could get maximum.
And you could feel the wind coming as the paddle was coming through the air. And if you let go of the chair, she started over. And so as a 15-year-old girl who is being beaten by this 300-plus pound woman, I can't help but to let go of the chair. I'm almost to...
You swatted away.
Yeah, I'm almost to hit the ground. And it was... that was probably my worst day at New Bethany, was that. But I knew that I was going home. So I was just like...
Going home?
Because some girls were only put there 1 year to 1 year. And then your parents had to re-sign you again. But legally they had kept me against my will for 3 months. And I didn't know until I got home that in the state of Louisiana, 17 years old, you're a legal adult. And I had turned 17 in March, but they kept me till June. So legally it was...
Why did your parents put you there to begin with?
Well... I was attempting suicide a lot. I had been raped by 3 of my friend's brothers, and then instead of getting help, I was just moved to another family member's house. But my stepfather had also been grooming me since I was 4 years old. And
been grooming you?
Yes, to be a wife.
Since you were 4?
From the time I was 4 till I was 14.
Your stepfather?
Mm-hmm.
He was telling you he was going to make you his wife?
No, he was showing me how to be a wife. Sexually. And so when all that came out, I had gotten raped by the 3 neighbor boys also, and so I got packed up and moved to my aunt and uncle's house, and I started attempting suicide. I
don't blame you.
I just wanted out.
Sure.
And my mother called me on the phone and said that she wanted to take me to Disneyland so that we could bond.
Oh, no.
And she took me to New Bethany and left me there.
How horrible. Disneyland's every kid's favorite thing. And
yeah.
That's really cruel. So how have you dealt with your parents afterwards?
Actually, I would have to say that I felt like I had... Now I know what Stockholm is.
Stockholm Syndrome.
But
that's when a hostage feels like they have to protect or support their captors.
Exactly. And I think for the last 30-some years, I acted as if my stepfather never did anything to me. I protected my siblings. I just went about life as if that didn't happen. And I was really in denial of a lot of things. And it wasn't until I found the New Bethany survivors that I had stifled who I was. And when I met my friends and began to be able to talk about it, that's when I started growing.
And New Bethany survivors is what?
it's a lot of the girls that have been through New Bethany for the last 4 decades.
You connected via the internet?
Yes, via Facebook. We're actually in the process of moving it right now, but we've had a website up for the last 10, 12 years.
2005. So when did you leave New Bethany? What?
1982, June of 82.
So for 20 years after you left New Bethany,
30,
you never really focused on what your parents had done, the horrors that had been done to you by your stepfather, by the neighbor boys, at this place, at New Bethany. Were you sexually harmed in New Bethany?
I believe so, but I believe that...
It's hard to remember after all the trauma, I'm sure.
Exactly, and I visualize what happened, and another friend of mine has confirmed that, yes, he did take you in that room a lot, but as to the actual, I've blocked that, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and so at New Bethany, you talked about the New Bethany girls, New Bethany survivors. It helped you finally heal after 20 years, 30 years of pain. But did you bond within New Bethany with these girls? Were you allowed to look at them, hug them, take care of them?
No.
That was against the rules.
Contact was not really. If you created a friend, you were automatically separated and put on either sides of the room.
Friendship was against the rules.
Yeah, they called it cliques.
Wow.
And we couldn't be in cliques, and you could talk to each other, but you couldn't. Like, I could have never known what Simone's background was.
And Simone was there when you were there.
Yep, Simone was there with me.
And you described something you told me about. Simone was 4 years younger than you, and they did something to her. Tell that story.
Well, I think it would be better if Simone told that story,
All right.
actually.
I'll tell you what. Why don't I thank you, Rhonda, very much for telling me what you have to tell me. And why don't you switch seats with Simone and let me interview her for a bit.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Rhonda. I am always struck by the bravery, the courage.
Listen.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine talking with survivors of institutional abuse. If you want to call in, it's 202-889-9797. Had a number of different powerful stories in the studio. I understand we've got Michael from the Bronx on the line. What do you think of these stories? Pretty powerful stuff, huh?
Powerful. My heart is melting and crying for these young ladies. I hope they can hear me. Can they hear me?
Many of them can. Not sure all of them can, but they'll be able to hear it on the archive later on.
Very well. From what I am hearing, first off, it makes me so mad that these institutions, instead of helping these young ladies out that were troubled from earlier incidents, they broaden or widen the injustice further by, and I'm going to use the legal terms, the assault on them, the abuse, the violence, the basic federal civil rights violations that have been going on. I got to hand it to you, ladies. You are all so doggone brave to be speaking with Mark and telling your stories on the air, and I encourage you that you go national on this. This is why these southern states, these red states, are so freaking screwed up in their heads, and they got the gall to want to talk about being patriotic, got the gall to be saying the Pledge of Allegiance, saying liberty and justice.
I'll tell you, Michael, it's true, and we're going to actually have a young woman come on talk about what Alabama did to her, and these occurred in Louisiana. But I do have to say, some of these camps, they're in Maine, they're in New Jersey, they're in Utah. A lot of them are in the South. You're absolutely right about that, but not all of them. Not all of them. The first woman, Janine, was in California. So this is a nationwide problem. Again, I agree it's more in the South than elsewhere, and I'm not defending the South. But you have to understand, this is not only the South. This is a nationwide problem.
I understand, and thank you for clarifying that. The fact of the matter is, I think this is a matter that needs to be referred to Attorney General Eric Holder's office. We have a widespread systemic pattern of federal civil rights violations and clear case of physical, even sexual abuses. And the reason why I know this, I know about this, I can empathize with these ladies, is because we've had the same crap going on here in New York City with cases with the NYPD. And I get so fed up with the subsequent cover-ups that are going on within these institutions. That is also obstruction of truth and justice in my book. So, yes, ladies, I encourage you. Huh?
Let me tell you something, Michael, and we're going to talk a little bit about this a little bit on the broadcast. We have been trying, at least since 2009, to pass legislation to regulate these places because they're unlicensed. Regulators don't come in. Many of them are private. Some of them assert it's a religious right to do what they do, and inspectors don't come in. Sometimes they're shut down. They're opened in another state. The same guy, this guy Mac Ford, has had like 3 of these places. And so one of the ways to regulate them, the best way, is Congress to pass federal legislation. There's actually a bill by Congressman George Miller of California. It's called the Stop Abuse in Residential Treatment Act. It was passed by the Democratic House in 2009. The Republicans won't pass it. But interesting.
Show their true colors.
Well, I'll tell you this. Interesting thing about that bill, every Democrat save one voted for it. Some 230 Democrats voted for it. But 40% plus of Republicans voted for it too. So even, not quite the majority, but even a substantial number, almost half the Republicans, also felt, you know what, torture, abuse of children, this is a bad thing, we need to regulate this. So I think it's this kind of legislation that we can actually get passed. I want to get back to my other survivors, but I'll tell you what you could do to help, Michael. If you'll help publicize this, and you'll call your member of Congress and make sure they support this act, we can help stop these awful places, because there's thousands of kids in these places today who are being mistreated today. And by the way, it's not just women. There's a filmmaker by the name of Nick Gallia. You can find out his film at nickgaglia.com. He was mistreated in a camp, much like Straight that you heard about in New Jersey, and he describes his what happened to him in a movie. Aaron Bacon, a young kid, was murdered in Utah by a wilderness camp. So you're absolutely right about the strength of these women here, but this actually is something that occurs to boys and girls. And also occurs in the South and outside the South. And actually, there are 3 camps I know about outside the United States. One in Mexico, one in Jamaica, and one in American Samoa, where kids in Mexico. I met a young woman at this convention. She was placed in a dog cage and forced in Mexico to live in a dog cage. That's the kind of torture and abuse, and almost none of these people are punished. Almost never are they punished.
Can I mention one more thing
real quick?
Before
Go
I
ahead.
depart?
Yeah.
All right. First off, we had daycare centers here in New York City that was shut down for that abuse also, so it could happen elsewhere. And furthermore, ladies and everyone that's listening, anybody that's going to say it's our religious right to do these actions, do not believe that for a moment. There is nothing, absolutely nothing in Scripture that permits abuse of another human being, especially these Christian, right-wing Christian fanatics and want to state that kind of farce and lie. You're talking to a Christian, you're talking to a Catholic right here. I just want to set the record straight and keep it real for everyone so you all may be aware of your rights and your surroundings. There is nothing that advocates this kind of injustice. In fact, Jesus himself said to love one another and go about peace. This is totally contradicting to what the Scripture says under the gospel of Jesus.
Couldn't agree with you more, Michael, and I really appreciate your call.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Good
for
luck,
calling.
ladies.
Thank you. And, of course, Michael demonstrates the passion that I want everyone who hears this show to feel. Michael, like me, is not a survivor of these places, but he's angered, quite rightly, by what's going on. And if this story is new to you, if you think this sounds a little weird or over the top, and it is weird and it is over the top, you can check out other shows I've done on this topic. Go to marklevinetalk.com. Look up, go to my archive and look for teen or abuse, and you'll find I've done a number of shows. You can hear from dozens of victims. It's not just the ones I'm bringing here today. You can also check out Nick Gallia's film, Over the GW, or Aaron Bacon. Check it out. Find it out. This is actually going on in America. And next time you hear someone talk about a boot camp or Scared Straight or wilderness camp or troubled teen or residential drug treatment center, here's what you do. If they're not allowed to communicate freely, that place is a prison camp. If they're not allowed to leave of their own free will, that place is likely to be abused. to have kids that are abused. Because remember, if you're not allowed to leave, you're not allowed to call anyone, they can monitor everything that goes in and out. We've got to stop and regulate these places. Okay, Simone, you've been sitting here next to me for a bit, and I want to get right to your story. As horrible as we don't do pain-offs here, but as horrible as the stories we've just heard of Janine and Rhonda and Leslie and Dina, your story is pretty damn awful. You never really had parents.
No.
Speak into the microphone.
No.
You grew up in, I guess, foster homes and.
I had parents that had adopted me, but it was not. It just was not a good match.
Okay, and they sent you to New Bethany Home for Girls?
I'm not sure exactly how I ended up at New Bethany. I just ended up there.
And how old were you when you got there?
I was 13.
13 years old, and how long were you there?
Until I was 16 and a half.
So 3.5 years. Now that's longer than most of the women we've heard. 3.5 years. Describe some of the things you saw at New Bethany. You probably don't know where to begin.
I don't know where to begin. It just daily terror. Just terror daily.
Physically,
sexually, emotionally, spiritually.
Well, let's go through them. Sorry, but physically, what would they do?
The physical abuse was horrific. They would the licks, they called the paddlings, they were licks. And I can remember many different times receiving licks. And Nora Carter, the house mother, Claire Shipman, another woman that worked in there, they would hit me so hard that, well, like Rhonda had said, you can feel the air from the paddle, but also I can remember hearing them actually grunting, like they were just trying to use as much strength as they could to break me.
What? I mean, it's hard to imagine someone being so cruel. Again, I don't doubt your word in the least, but what was this woman's motivation? Do you have any idea?
I have absolutely no idea.
She's just a mean, sadistic person?
Yes.
Yeah. Spare the rod, spoil the child, Rhonda just said.
It was on the bridge.
It was on the bridge.
There was a scripture on the bridge that said something about sparing the rod and spoiling the child. And
so they thought they were doing good by beating the heck out of you.
They thought that they were going to break me. And I'm still broken now. But while I was there, I did not allow them to see that they were breaking me. I did not allow them to see. I didn't show any emotion.
That must have taken tremendous fortitude and courage. I mean, that's very, very hard to do. A woman is beating you senseless, and you're still not sure. So you're not crying?
I did not cry.
In the 3.5 years you were there?
Once.
One time?
Mm-hmm.
In all 3.5 years?
Mm-hmm.
What happened that one time?
I had received a very bad beating. And I was walking down Whitehall, and I just had they had Whitehall and Greenhall in different places there. And I leaned up against the wall, and I just kind of fell to the floor and lost it, and cried. I just cried. I just knew that this is where I was going to be until I was 18 years old.
And you were all alone in the hallway?
A couple of girls, were walking, but no one, you couldn't.
No staff?
No, you couldn't, no one could stop and ask if I was okay, or that just was not allowed at New Bethany.
But I understand one young girl, namely the person standing next to you,
Rhonda.
She did.
She did.
Even though it was against the rules.
She leaned down and she put her arms around me and said into my ear to stay strong. And I remembered that for the whole rest of the time that I was there.
And that made you strong. Just those words.
Mm-hmm.
That this very kind person next to you did, risking her own safety to say. What would happen if Rhonda had been caught hugging you, saying, stay strong?
We would have been accused of being lesbians.
Oh, God.
We would have been thrown into a cold shower and scrubbed with Comet and green scratchers.
With what?
Comet and green scratchers, like a very
To like
Brillo
scrape, like a Brillo pad, like
to scrape the filth off of us.
so that you would get bloody, and then the Comet would.
Clean us. Yes.
Did that ever happen to you?
I was scrubbed with Brillo pads, yes, with green scratchers. I was accused of, I had gotten into the shower, and when you got into the shower, it was when it was your turn, you get in, you have 3 minutes, and you get out. And I forgot my washcloth, and I was accused of masturbating.
And they scrubbed you with the Brillo
with Comet
pads.
and green scratchers.
You mentioned sexual abuse. If you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about that.
I was raped.
Okay.
It was not. I think sexual abuse is
Too light.
Too light. I was viciously raped.
Viciously raped.
Viciously.
More than
yes.
once.
Many times. I can't even count how many times.
By
the principal of the school.
Macford.
No.
Another a person who worked for him.
Macford also abused me, but this was a different person.
And you didn't feel that you could say that you had been raped?
No. No, it's within the faith-based community, and I use that form for them lightly as well, because I do not believe that they were any type of faith.
Right.
But the men were the highest power. And if a man felt sexual feelings towards a child, he would act upon those sexual feelings. And if that man was married, his wife would beat you for tempting her husband.
So the husband would rape you, and then the wife would beat you because you tempted her husband?
Yes.
Wow, that's sick.
Very.
Now, why, I'm sure my listeners are asking themselves, why aren't these people punished? Why isn't this guy in jail? I mean, rape, you can get a life sentence for rape, or at least 15 to 25 years. Why weren't these people at New Bethany prosecuted?
I don't know.
Did you report your crimes?
I did.
Did you report them to the police?
I did.
Did you ever manage to escape New Bethany?
I did, yes.
Tell me about that.
I was a runner. I was, I would, any time I had any type of chance to run, I would run. I made it to town one time and went to the police department, and I was, I had bruises and open wounds, scratches. I mean, I was beat up, and I had been raped, and I told the police department what had happened to me, and they said, well, let's call your parents.
And you didn't have any parents?
Mac Ford, I was left there. They were, he was my parent.
How was he your parent? How was this sick bastard your parent?
Because he was also an orphanage. He was a children's home. All of us were told, even the kids that had, maybe had just gotten into a little bit of trouble and were sent there. There are many different reasons that girls were sent there. Mac Ford told us that he was the closest thing to God that we would ever meet, and that we belonged to him. He owned us.
Well, but you tell the police that you've been beaten and raped, and they can see it. This isn't a question of your word against his.
No.
The evidence is all over your body.
Most definitely.
They take pictures of
No.
the abuse?
No. They put me in the police car and they took me back.
And they took you. The police took you back to
police
New
took
Bethany.
me back to New
Did they tell
Bethany.
you why?
There wasn't anyone that would come get me or could come get me.
Because you didn't have.
I didn't have.
He had power of attorney over all of us. So he was our legal guardian. He could do anything he wanted.
Simone, I've known you now for about a year, and I have to say you're one of the strongest people I've ever known. One of the things you should know about Simone is she's taking this horrific life experience, and she's working every day as part of an organizer for an organization called HEAL. You can find out more about HEAL at HEAL-online.org. Simone, and I do a little bit, but Simone does most of it, helps rescue kids to the extent that we can who are in these awful places. And she's pretty much devoted her life. I mean, she's got a family and kids, and she's got a lot of stuff going on, but she's devoted her life to making sure that no young boy or girl ever suffer what you underwent. And I got to tell you, that's, every time I hear your story, my heart breaks a little, but then it builds up 3 times stronger, because I know what good you're doing and how committed you are to the cause. And you just got an award, actually, the highest award that the SIA organization gives, the Phoenix Award, for your work in helping children escape. And I just want to thank you personally and say I love you, and I'm really glad that you do what you do. So wow, that's emotional for me. Probably is for you too. We're going to take another break. This is Mark Levine in a really emotional end to what was for me an emotional weekend, spending 3 days with survivors of institutional abuse. And I'm so grateful to all of them who are coming here on my radio show today. I really, it's hard to convey, I think, the powerful emotion when you bring up these awful things that happen to these wonderful people. They have to relive it to tell the story, and it's painful. And it's kind of hard for me because I know I'm asking people I care about to go through a little bit of pain, but we all understand. They understand, and I understand. It's only by sharing this pain with you, in the hopes that you do something about it, in the hopes that you act about it, that we can stop the current ongoing abuse and torture and rape and mistreatment of teenage girls and boys all across America. So they are undergoing pain for you. And I'm going to ask that you call your member of Congress when I'm done with the Inside Scoop today at 202-225-3121. That's the Capitol switchboard. You can get any senator, any House, any representative, and ask them whether they support torture and abuse of our teens in these residential treatment centers and these wilderness camps and boot camps and so-called Christian facilities that don't seem very Christian to me. Just simply ask them if they know about it, because they probably don't, and if they're willing to support a bill to stop it. And if they don't know information about it, you can go to SIA, Survivors of Institutional Abuse. You can go to heal-online.org. There's a number of organizations. You can look them up on the web. If you have any doubt as to what these brave people are telling you, you can listen to a lot of testimony on my website, marklevinetalk.com. You can watch some great movies by Nick Gallia, NICKGAGLIA.com, Over the W, Aaron Bacon. There's a new movie out by Vince Grashaw called Cold Water. Inform yourself, because this is going on in America, and it shouldn't be. So the bravery of these people is amazing. And I got another very, very brave person sitting next to me now. You, Teresa, I just met a couple days ago, actually.
Indeed. Yes, we did.
And,
my pleasure.
Yeah. Well, you were not with the SIA organization last year. You just, I guess, found out about it, a few months ago?
I did. Throughout the years that social media came out, we had an opportunity to reconnect with people from our past, old family members and friends. And so I started thinking about some of the girls in the home that I knew and what names I could remember. I did look them up and try to find them.
Now, you grew up in Alabama.
Florida.
Florida, excuse me.
Yes.
You grew up in Florida. You now live in Alabama.
I live in Ohio.
Right. I thought you mentioned Alabama
so
at some point. There are a lot of you. You grew up in Florida, in that part of Florida that's the Panhandle. That's sort of the southern part of Florida. Ironically, since it's the northern part, but it's the part that's most affiliated with the cultural South. And your parents put you in what place?
I was left at a home called Charity Haven Girls Home in Milton, Florida, right outside of Pensacola.
And you said you were left there.
I was left there, yes.
How did that happen?
I was left in Milton, Florida at the girls' home after I was taken on a 4-hour drive. Recommendation of the home that I was in, and child locks were put on the vehicle so that I could not get out. My parent pulled me into the driveway and unloaded my case and introduced me to the Mr. and Mrs. of the home and pulled off. And I did not know I was going to be left there.
How old were you at the time?
I was 15.
Why would your parents drop you off at this place that you were locked into and then turn around and say goodbye? What was going on?
You know, that's a really good question. The reason that my mom, that I believe now, and I wish that I could say that she had the best intentions, but I was a survivor of a different kind of abuse at home, and my stepfather apparently liked little girls better than he liked my mom. And so after that had come out, he was taken to prison, and I felt like maybe mom just couldn't look at me anymore.
You were raped by your stepfather?
I was molested for 10 years.
Molested for 10 years by your stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
So he's sent to prison.
Correct.
For molesting you, his stepdaughter.
Yes.
And then your mom gets so upset that she sends you away.
Yes. And Charity Haven, the home that I was sent away to, was not the first place that I was sent. I've actually been in several different mental hospitals and homes. Charity Haven in particular is the one that I'm here to speak about because of the lack of oversight and the abuse that went on in the home.
How ironic they call it Haven when it was anything but. Tell me about some of the abuse that you saw there.
Well, I mean, if I had a list, I tell you, the list has been in my brain all of these years, and I know I can't give dates, but there was a lot of abuse that went on in the home there. In particular, girls were dragged into a closet and locked in. I also helped drag girls in. I was dragged into this closet. It had no windows. It did have a locked door on it. And a constant feed, audio feed of preaching all the time. That was one of the things that was bothersome. Girls screaming and scratching and clawing for their lives are tacked down by their fellow peers and dragged into this prayer room, to the get right room, if you will.
That's what they called it, the get right room.
It was called the prayer room. I've heard the get right room in other
okay.
scenarios, but the prayer room in this case.
And you'd sit there locked in a small closet. Was there a light switch in the closet?
There was a light switch, but there was no windows, and the closet was very small. I want to say maybe like a 10-by-4 room.
No chairs in there.
Correct. No chairs, no furniture. You had your Bible.
You sit on the floor.
Sit on the floor.
And you hear verses all day.
Yeah, they would.
What if you had to go to the bathroom? The door's locked.
If you went to the bathroom, you had to wait for someone to hopefully come get you, and if they did, in a lot of cases, girls would soil on themselves.
Because they couldn't get out to go to the bathroom.
They could not get out.
What if you were hungry?
If you were hungry, you were hungry.
That's about it.
Yeah, and you no matter how hungry you were never allowed to ask. You were never allowed to mention it.
What would happen if you asked for food? How would you be punished? You said you were not allowed to, so you break this rule. You say, I'm hungry, I want to eat. Maybe a new girl who doesn't know the rules. What would happen to such a person?
I never saw anybody break that rule.
Really?
Meals were served at a certain time. And so because of that, I've never saw anybody break that. Well, I can give you some general consequences for any type of rule breaking.
All right. Well, what would be something you could break? Like looking at someone?
Looking at someone would definitely be an offense that would earn you a demerit.
Looking at someone, like looking them in the eyes?
Yes.
That's a demerit.
Absolutely.
Okay. How about hugging or showing compassion for someone?
No physical contact amongst the girls. No physical contact. So a girl is breaking down crying. If you help her feel a little bit better about herself, what would be some of the punishments? It would be misconstrued. If you were to help a child, and again, we were all children in this home.
Sure.
It would be misconstrued as being maybe a lesbian.
Really?
Or Correct, yeah. Or maybe you were co-conspiring with this person, and so they kept us very distant from one another as much as they could so that there was no co-conspiracies going on.
Co-conspiracy. So basically you were completely mistrusted the whole time.
Completely mistrusted and discredited.
And discredited. How would they discredit you?
Well, discrediting the word itself is just, it doesn't even give it justice. When we go...
you were called names.
We were called names. We were whores and the B word. We're on the radio, so I'll try to be careful with my language. Now,
you were called whores. Did you have a sexual past before you went into this?
I had never, with the exception of the stepfather,
right.
I had never had any... I was a virgin when I entered the program. I had never done drugs. I had never smoked cigarettes.
You're a good student?
My grades had slipped after the issues had come out about my stepfather.
I don't blame you.
Well.
But you were called a whore.
I was. In fact, the feminine smell that came from me is what enticed what happened in my home. And if I had been more
They
godly,
blamed you.
Indeed.
For your stepfather molesting you.
Correct. Yes. And if I had walked the line with God, then maybe that would not have happened.
And were kids beaten there?
They were.
Oh,
they were.
They paddled you?
They did. In one instance, a girl and I had tried to run away, and we were at a camp up in Tennessee. And when we all got found and brought home, the entire home was reprimanded. Girls had to stand in line. They were forced to lay down on the couch. Girls holding arms and legs and holding the other girls down screaming. And the elder of the home, the lady that ran the place for the most part, would come in with a paddle, and she would raise it up as high above her hands as she could, like a samurai sword, and come down as hard as she could on your fanny or on your back or on your legs or wherever it was she managed to land it.
What if you were to try to escape? You don't want to be paddled. You try to run. You try to make a run for it. You thrash around so you're not paddled. What would happen to you then?
Yeah, there were girls that had tried to escape the beatings, and you really can't. There were enough girls there who were willing to restrain you because they didn't want the beating themselves.
And you had to do that, right? You had to restrain other girls lest you be beaten yourself.
I did restrain other girls, yes.
And they forced you to do that. And how does that make you feel about yourself at that time? If you don't mind my asking.
Yeah, the beatings were one thing, but when I had to become a perpetrator, it was very different for me. It was something that I did not enjoy doing and that I was very uncomfortable with.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Teresa, you gave a very powerful speech at the rally yesterday. I'm going to post that on my website. We're going to let people listen to what you had to say.
Thank you.
If you had just a few words for the people who are listening to this, who really have no idea that this stuff goes on. I mean, I certainly was not aware that these abuses were this severe until I got involved in this issue, and I dare say the vast majority of Americans have no idea that this stuff goes on. What would you ask them to do?
Wow. I mean, there's so much that needs to be done, and I feel like the biggest obstacle that we have right now is the fact that most of these children have been discredited, and so a lot of what they're telling people don't believe them, and that is a horrible position to be in, to not have anybody believe you, your parents, the law enforcement, which in my case, in my home in particular, was called on several occasions.
No, you went to the police yourself?
I did. I went to the police department there, and I also went to the Children's Services Agency.
Did you escape to do that?
My escape was very unique.
They won't let you call the police.
No. You had no access to phones, television. Playing cards were demonic.
Playing cards were demonic.
So you had your Bible.
I love playing cards.
Yes, indeed. I do too now. So now that I know the truth, and that was
so you got out.
I did.
How'd you get out?
I became very clever and very manipulative while I was in the home for survival reasons.
How long were you in the home?
I was there at that particular location for 8 months.
8 months,
okay. I had begged my parents to take me home, and it just didn't seem to be working. As much as I promised them that I was saved and a Christian and that things were different, I wasn't different. I hadn't done anything to deserve to go there to begin with. So I learned that I didn't have to beat people or take beatings as long as I faked that I was sick.
That was your out.
That was my out.
So you pretended to be sick.
I pretended to be sick,
And
and this went on for a while.
For several months.
Yes.
Like you said. And then finally, and I'm sorry to cut this story short because I want to get to Lee's story as well.
Yeah.
But they actually took a healthy appendix out of you.
They did.
Because you claimed to have appendicitis.
They did.
But that got you out of the home.
It did get me out of the home. A healthy appendix was removed when I was 16 years old.
And then you went and you actually did report this to police.
I did.
And
I thought
did they arrest the people at the home, shut it down?
They are still there. In fact, they removed the girls from the home, and I thought that it had been closed down, but they have relocated to Texas, and that is where they are owned and operating right now.
What's the name of the home in Texas?
I believe it is still Charity Haven. I am not sure.
Okay. And the same people are running and doing the same thing today to other
That
young
is correct.
girls.
Yeah.
And the police didn't arrest anybody.
No,
Did they tell you? Did they tell you why? They just said they don't believe you.
My mother had put me in so many places up until that point that my credibility was gone. So
even though you did nothing wrong, the fact that they put you in all these places destroyed your credibility to say that all these places were, or at least particularly this last one, was terrible.
The fact that we were put in all these places has destroyed my entire life, Mark, and I'm just so grateful for people like you that have no reason to do this but to get this story out, and we are so grateful for you.
Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your listeners as well.
Listen,
thank you so much.
We're going to do something about this. We're going to pass legislation to stop these places. Excellent. It may take some time, but we're going to work on it until it's done. And I'm not going to let this issue go.
I gave up.
Until we're done. Yeah. Thank you. It's really a pleasure meeting you.
I'm very excited.
Go out, get Lee to come in. We'll just have a few minutes left with her.
Okay.
Folks, I can't tell you the emotions. This happens to be, just go ahead, that's fine. Women here today, but they're boys that have suffered this too. They're from all over the country. And each story is a little bit different, but you can hear these are innocent people that are being, or have been, tortured and abused. And it's going on right here in America. And the question is, how are we going to stop it? What are we going to do about it? Is Lee coming in?
But I can interview.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought Lee wanted to be interviewed. That's why I went ahead and. All right. So, tell you what. Let's take a break.
Okay.
When we get back, we'll talk more about that, folks. If you want to call in, it's 202-889-9797. 202-889-9797. You got just a few minutes left. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine. I'm afraid actually that's all the time we have. I was going to interview Steve Kimbrough, but we just ran out of time. So this is the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine. If you want to take action to stop this abuse, I encourage you to do so. It's 202-225-3121's Congressional Switchboard. Ask your member of Congress to support Stop Abuse in Residential Treatment Centers. Act now, because these kinds of things are continuing and we have to stop these stories. This is Mark Levine. This is the Inside Scoop. You can watch this show and any other show I've done at marklevinetalk.com. Follow me on Twitter at marklevinetalk. And we'll be right back next week for more of the Inside Scoop on We Act Radio AM 1480.